cancer, the battle inside you. Let's meet our new friend Joe. He is your average 50-year-old who works in a bank. Fairly healthy but no gym rat. He does not smoke. He occasionally drinks wine. He is married to his high school sweetheart Sarah. They have 2 children and live in the suburbs. Joe is happy, but things are about to change. He does not know it yet, but he will soon be in a fight for his life against the most evil traitors ever. You see, some of his own cells are about to rebel. For the non-biologist, we are not talking about jail cells, battery cells, storm cells, solar cells, or even cell phones. We are talking about body cells. Joe, like all of us, is made up of millions of cells. Liver cells, heart cells, stomach cells, lung cells, and despite what his boss says, even brain cells. You get the picture. These cells are like mini factories, producing substances that Joe needs to process his food, walk, talk, and despite what his boss says, think. They also form structures that he needs, such as bones, muscles, heart, kidneys, blood vessels, and a whole host of other things. Pretty much everything Joe does depends on his cells working together properly. They group themselves into organs in order to be more efficient. Joe's cells do not live as long as he does. They are always working, unlike Joe, and eventually they wear out and die, so they have to be replaced. This is accomplished by his cells dividing into daughter cells, which replace old or dead cells. This is called, simply, cell replication. Since there are millions of cells in his body, this is a very common process. Remarkably, this normally occurs without any problems. Joe's body produces only enough new cells to replace those that have died. The cell manufacturing process is very carefully controlled by his body. Occasionally, however, a mistake is made. A mutation may occur. Most of you have heard of mutations, since they often feature in popular fiction. In real life, genetic mutations are not as dramatic and do not usually give people superpowers. A mutation is a process that changes the DNA of a cell. So, what is DNA? The nucleus of the cells in Joe's body typically contains a very long, complex molecule called deoxyribonucleic acid, thankfully usually just called DNA. Think of DNA as the blueprint or brains, or central processing unit of the cell. It carries the code for all the instructions that the cell needs to carry out its functions. For a cell to reproduce, as we just discussed, it must first make a copy of its DNA and then split into 2 identical cells. This way, every cell in the body should have the same DNA or the same code. Mutations result in a cell that has a different DNA from its parent, and therefore a different set of instructions for how to behave. Mutations could be caused by several factors, including exposure to certain types and amounts of radiation, exposure to certain chemicals, or simply mistakes made during the complex process of cell division. As you would expect, with more and more cell divisions happening as we grow older, the likelihood of developing mutations increases with age. Many mutations lead to harmless changes which may not significantly affect the behavior of the mutated cell. Joe never even knows about them as they stay silent. However, sometimes these mutated cells may go rogue. They may divide without regulation or control, and each of the daughter cells will also tend to divide and proliferate without control. Eventually, there will be so many of them that they will form a tumor or lump. This tumor could be benign or malignant. Benign tumors tend to grow slowly, and they respect boundaries. They do not usually invade other organs or spread to other parts of the body. Malignant tumors, however, are not as well behaved. Compared with normal cells, they have a growth advantage, which will allow them to dominate and kill their normal neighbors. In other words, the mutant cells compete unfairly. They may squeeze out or starve their neighbors. For example, malignant leukemia cells will eventually take over the bone marrow, leaving nowhere for the normal bone marrow cells to grow. That is why Joe's cancer is like treason. His own cells have rebelled against him, refusing to obey orders to stop multiplying, but that's not all. The offspring of the original mutated cell also tend to develop additional mutations which may give them even more of a growth advantage, as well as the ability to develop resistance to the normal control mechanisms, which would include destruction by the body's immune systems, as well as resistance to treatments such as chemotherapy and radiation therapy. The tumor cells are also able to form blood vessels to provide themselves with nutrition. This is to ensure that, like an invading army, the tumor does not run out of food. The most important aspect of cancer is the ability to spread or metastasize to other organs. One of Joe's colon cells could divide into a cell that has a malignant mutation, and because of the growth advantage and ability to reproduce without control, these mutated cells would eventually grow into a tumor, which could then spread to other organs such as the lymph nodes and liver, where they grow into new tumors. It is noteworthy that if a biopsy or a tissue sample is taken from the liver tumor, it will show cells that look like colon cancer cells under the microscope, not liver cells. In other words, a colon cancer cell remains a colon cancer cell no matter where it goes. Anyway, back to Joe. With millions of cells dividing every single day of his life, it is certain that some mistakes are being made, causing potentially harmful mutations. So why had he not already fallen ill? For that matter, why is everyone not getting constantly ill from these mutations? The answer is that Joe, like all of us, has a very powerful early detection system. It is called the immune system and is essentially the police force of the body. It has the ability to scrutinize millions of cells and identify a potential troublemaker or traitor cell. It then very efficiently eliminates the bad cell. It is a very complex system, and as with any complex system, things may go wrong. First, there are a number of conditions which can affect the immune system and weaken potential defenses against certain types of cancer. People who get organ transplants, for example, have to be on medications which suppress the activity of the immune system in order to prevent rejection of the transplanted organ. They are at increased risk of getting some cancers. There are a whole host of diseases which can affect the immune system, but in general it is a pretty effective system in defending all of us against bacteria, viruses, and of course rogue cancer cells. Anything that could be considered an attack on our bodies. Cancer cells, however, are harder to detect and kill than bacteria and viruses. They are derived from our own normal cells, and the differences may be subtle. Additionally, as just mentioned, some of the traitor cells are able to develop ways to avoid being destroyed by the immune system. These would include masquerading as a normal cell, finding ways to avoid being seen by immune system, or finding ways to inactivate the weapons of the immune system. So even though Joe's immune system has been able to find and destroy most of the traitor cells, at least one has been able to evade detection, and that is where the trouble begins. The bad cell is rapidly dividing into mostly identical bad cells, known as a clone, which further divide to form millions of cancer cells. From then on, it is a numbers game. If Joe's immune system can mount enough defenses early on to shut down this whole process, he wins. His body eliminates the traitors, and his cells go back to living harmoniously with each other. They have achieved world, or at least body peace. And this victory usually is not associated with permanent damage to his body structure or to his own normal, well-behaved cells. If, on the other hand, more cancer cells can survive his defenses than are destroyed by the immune system, then the cancer grows and wins, or it would if Joe could not call for reinforcements. Fortunately, nowadays he can do so. These reinforcements are provided by doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and other specially trained persons. In other words, by modern medicine. Unfortunately, although very powerful, the cancer-fighting tools of modern medicine are not as sophisticated or as discriminating as Joe's immune system. There may be collateral damage or damage to innocent bystanders in the form of his normal cells. Since these normal cells are just going about their business doing what they should be doing, modern medicine always attempts to limit the damage to them. Modern medicine is always learning, with a focus on achieving what Joe's immune system should have done: kill the bad cells, save the good ones. Modern medicine can provide different treatments which would include surgery, chemotherapy, or the use of other medications, and radiation therapy. In the other videos we will talk about these options and Joe's fight with cancer in more detail. We will also talk about things that you could do today to try to reduce your risk of cancer.